Well, I have a theory that as artists, our job is 50%. Our job is to write as if we are on the moon and no one will read it, and bear the absolute guts of our soul in what is true for us and what moves us. And the second that we hit publish or send, we're fucking done, because the other 50% of art is how people receive it. And to marinate in the adoration or the hate on the other side of that 50% is why many people suffer.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, how do I do my 50% in a way that is deeply, deeply true to me? And let the world have their way with it. And some poems I've written have millions of views and some of them have 200. And I love those poems just the same.
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift. So you're listening to this podcast because you have a gift to share with the world and you want to put it out there in a big way. If you're a creative person, you probably dream of building a thriving business and an abundant life around your art. But while creating is immensely rewarding, monetizing your art can have a shadow side, and that's what my guest today is here to help us understand. Janne Robinson is the author of 2 books, This is for the Women Who Don't Give a Fuck, and There's Cobwebs on Her Vagina. Over the last 8 years, Janne has published hundreds of articles, some of them reaching 2 million or more views on publications like Huffington Post, Thought Catalog, and Elephant Journal. Her work has been featured by the BBC, The Today Show, Sydney Morning Herald, Forbes, and loads more. Her bold and honest expression of the human landscape is read and adored daily by 110,000 plus readers on Instagram. Janne is also an international speaker, a facilitator, a film director, and CEO of This is for the Women, a media and apparel brand that empowers women to walk tall like an old cypress tree and take up space, which I just love. She's currently working on her 3rd book, which is called Chosen, a memoir about her journey in search of finding and meeting her father for the first time. Janne, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here in a different story together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely in this conversation, I want to ask you about an announcement that you just made that you're stepping back from your business in order to focus on your art again. But before we get into that, can you just take us back to the beginning and tell us how it all started for you?
Yes, and I'll give you the Coles notes because we could be here a long time. But yeah, I have been writing since I was in grade 3. So I have been writing poems and song lyrics and all sorts of different forms of creative. And I officially leapt into, with a bit more intention, into being a writer in 2014. And so I quit both my jobs in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, and went to live in a little cabin on the Sunshine Coast. And I worked with Deanne Whalen, who is an amazing filmmaker. I interned with her.
And mutual friend of ours.
Yes. And I went through a transition that I'm actually in a very similar space than I was then right now, which is nice and unexpected. And I just started to put it out there for the world. And so I started to publish articles with Elephant Journal, different online publications. And there was a momentum to it. And I was well received. And before that, I tried to publish travel writing and had been terrible at it because I'm absolutely a nonfiction writer. I got rejected by everyone, but I was traveling and it made sense. I was living all over the world. And so I'm glad that I didn't give up and just say, oh, I'm not a writer. I just wasn't a travel writer.
Mm-hmm.
And
we all have our chosen forms. Mm-hmm. It's really important to find your own. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And it can change as well, but I'm not a travel writer. And I started to publish writing, and because I wrote poetry, but I also wrote nonfiction narrative around my life. And I've been in a journey of personal development for 10 years. And so I would often talk about the discovery of myself within my writing. And people loved that and brought their truth forward. And I was spending up to 6 hours a day responding to comments in emails and messages and giving advice at that point in my career as a writer.
Where were you sharing your material? Was it the articles that you said, or were you also active on social media with it at that time?
Yeah, a combination of, I remember I didn't have social media, and then Waylon Lewis, the founder of Elephant Journal, said, Yana, the whole point of this is that you create an audience of yourself. You're pretty much writing for free. Create some social media pages. So thanks, Waylon. And so a combination of social media and then Elephant Journal and those articles. And so then I ended up, I largely was asked by the world to step more into mentoring and coaching. I would say that I've always been a writer, but supporting other people, there was a real demand around me. And I think it's a natural human desire to support each other. I think we're
so wait, did that whole thing come about, the coaching part, did that actually begin before your first book was published?
Yes. Yeah. I started to coach,
wow.
I think I've been coaching for almost 8 years. So I think around 2015 or 16, I started to coach and started more as mentoring and then shifted into all kinds of things. So, but even then, as somebody who supports people, even when I was a bartender, I was secretly coaching people. So if we're empathetic and have an openness about us and have done work in ourselves to be a safe space, people feel that. And so it was a more official way I think I've been in the world in a long time. And so I've worked with probably hundreds of people one-on-one and thousands in group work, whether that was workshops. I hosted international retreats involving usually surfing or some kind of activities and coaching. I did all kinds of things. I've morphed into digital courses and online programs and published books. I've directed short poetry films. And it's been this. This is for the Woman as a media and apparel brand. I'm not currently making those products. I felt like there was something more sustainably empowering for women than wearing a shirt that said, this is for the women who don't give a fuck. I was like, I think there's a deeper way we can create empowerment. It works.
Although those shirts are rad. So
yes, they are. And I got tired of using creativity to create t-shirts and market them. So that was why I kind of shifted away from that. And they're fun. But yeah, it's been a deep journey as a creative of having millions of ideas and millions of ways to go and absolute willingness to explore and have different ways of giving my gifts. And it's been a whole landscape of many things. And the way that I like to simplify it is I have a Tony Robbins part and I have a Mary Oliver. Those are two pieces. I have the coach facilitator who can, I'll have over 1,000 people live on a call and pull someone forward and know nothing about them and have them turn their camera on and we'll just hit it with 1,000 people live. So I can do that. I can hold big spaces and do it with a lot of skill. And I can also write poems about grasshoppers. So that's the duality. And it's been a really beautiful journey. I sponsored my own visa to live in California, and I have over 8 books of poetry written that I'm also working on organizing and getting out to the world. And
so 8 books of poetry standing by, and 2 that you've published.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess, what I see in your work, in the poetry, in, the content that you post on social media is just this thread of uncompromising, raw honesty and authenticity and openness. And what I love that, the phrase that you use in your own bio where you describe yourself as I share slabs of my heart for a living, which I just love that so much. And that is a super vulnerable thing to do. So where did you get the courage to be so real in public? And were you always that way?
I would like to credit this by being raised in a household with two moms who encouraged, my one mom really encouraged me to talk about everything. But I am more bold and transparent than both my parents. So I think it was a combination of being raised where communication was encouraged. And I don't know, there's a part of me that feels uncomfortable with how uncomfortable the world is with honesty. I don't understand why there's any other form of communication or existence. And people are like, I'm shocked at how honest you are. And I'm like, I'm just shocked at how the whole fucking world isn't more honest. So it doesn't feel, there's moments where it feels like courage, but I just don't. I notice that I get very restricted and don't feel good in my body whenever there's something there, whether it's I need to repair with somebody in my life or if I'm not being fully open. I went for a coffee last week with a new friend, and I didn't want to share everything that was going on in my life. As Brene Brown says, we have marble jar friends, and I wasn't being fully transparent and honest with everything, and that didn't actually feel good inside. So I'm uncomfortable with masks. I'm uncomfortable with, saying I'm fine or okay when I'm not fine or okay. And I'm grateful for that because I think that we owe each other boldness and honesty. So I think combination of shaping, and also I'm so encouraged to continue to be honest because every time I share that honesty with the world, whether it's social media or a relationship, usually, it's really encouraged and they find it really refreshing. So I think that was a big moment for me was I actually wrote an article the day after I'd had an abortion, and I was not planning to write anything about the experience, but I was laying in bed and this big piece flowed out of me. And I was shocked. It was the most honest thing that I'd ever written. This was in 2014 or 15 in the very beginning, right when I moved into the cabin, I'd had an abortion. And I was scared of it. I was like, oh, Jesus, I've never been that honest before in my writing. And so I sat with it. I put it away for a couple of months, and I wanted to be very clear with why I was sharing it with this world. I didn't want to share it to, be supported or have attention. I didn't want to, my ex-boyfriend did not show up well, but it wasn't that I wanted to slam him. I wanted to be really sure that there was a clean, clear intention in it. And so I came back to it. And I remember sitting through and reading it, and it went through my entire process from the moment I realized I was pregnant and the honest reaction of, Jesus, fuck, I do not want that. That is not what I want. And everybody's neutrality, non-neutrality, a doctor who told me that I shouldn't have an abortion and that I would regret it. And how I got up and walked out of his office and said, hey, if I was a 14-year-old who didn't have a spine or know who I was, that could have really affected my decision. Like, how dare you? And talked about the boyfriend that didn't show up. I talked about the gown that I wore and the experience and the biological experience, because although a part of my brain did not want to have a child, our somatic bodies are wired to, from a very limbic primal place, make babies. And so abortion doesn't feel normal to a part of our bodies, even if we're at peace with it. And it had a lot. It was my whole process. And I ended up sharing it. And at first I was like, I'm just going to share this on Elephant Journal because those 11 million people are not the guy I went to high school with that I'm going to run into at Credo Coffee Shop. And he's going to be like, hey, I read your article. And I was like, I'm not willing to go there, but I will publish it with 11 million strangers. And I ended up I remember, Maggie, the moment, and I'm sharing this story in such detail because this is really my why. This is why I share slabs of my heart. But I remember standing in the kitchen of my cabin, and it was raining on the Sunshine Coast, and watching rain drip off of the prayer flags, and getting this, congratulations, you've been published, your article is live, and feeling such deep peace inside with the choice that I had made, that it didn't matter what came back, because I had spent time, I'd integrated it. And my intention was wanting to eradicate shame from the human experience. So many of us have abortions, and wanting to sweep some of the shame out into the sunlight. And so I ended up sharing it on my social media as well as Elephant Journal. And my very first boyfriend that I slept with, who was very religious, called me a murderer in a comment publicly. I also got called Woman of the Year. And then I received hundreds of messages and comments and emails. And one of them read, I don't remember if she was 15 or 14 or 16, but she said I was 15, and my father dropped me off at the clinic and told me never to tell anyone, not even my mom. And you're the first person I'm telling.
Oh man. Wow. What an honor. And wow.
And just feeling how deeply we need the permission to just be fucking human.
Yeah.
Just that we need to have this permission to share this massive weight that we feel alone with. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to be super honest. I'm going to teach through my life. I am going to not maybe ever invent something like a attachment theory or something wildly profound, but I'm committed to using my life as a tool to bring people into awareness and education on different things. And I have Gay Hendricks, who is a mentor of mine, has the same commitment of like, if it happens in my life, I'm going to teach about it. And it's a clean, clear intention of it's not messy. It's very much so, I think, to bring people into just how human everything that they hold is, and to do it with the tools of honesty and transparency.
And I mean, our own lives, that's something that we're all an expert in, and, an authority on. And we are, I think, with our inner worlds, we are, because we're taught to keep that under wraps. We can become estranged from ourselves that way when we're not actually living our authentic self and sharing our authentic self. And it's so in that respect, it's an act of service to others and also to yourself to share authentically like that. Having said that, there is such thing as, trolls and assholes and critics and people like your ex that will shame you and blame you and try to tear you down. So how have you dealt with that? I mean, I think what you said earlier was that this was the most honest I believe that you're probably that honest all the time. I think that this is touching on a very intimate place, right? You're probably honest even when you're talking about surfing or coffee, but this is just a really, it's a private and intimate topic. And how have you navigated those kind of like, I don't know, the criticism of the public square and how brutal it can be?
I mean, I think I'm a big fan of, I learned in a therapy session recently that it can be both, and opening myself up to the duality of the gray has been very healing. So I would say that there's a part of me that I have it on a surfboard. I almost tattooed it on my body, but I'm not going to do that. From A Course in Miracles, which says, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And so I'm a firm believer that if I show up as who I am and live honestly and transparently and people walk away, it's not that anything has been lost, whether that's a follower or a friend or a partner. And so there's this deep, deep commitment to being in a constant conversation with the authenticity of who I am, that I choose to belong to myself over belonging to anyone. And so I have had I remember I had 2 of 3 people on my team quit within a 48-hour window because I made a bold statement, and they were like, "You can't do that. We're a business." And I was like, fuck, we're a business. This is how I teach. And sometimes I'm an asshole. And sometimes I say things I incredibly regret. And then I have so much humility to show up and apologize. And it's like the whole world wants to control resonance. And really what it is, people who are speaking out are in fear because we feel safe when other people believe what we believe. So often when there is an opinion or a belief that is different than what we believe in ourselves, it threatens our safety and we want to control it. And so we speak out as an attempt to control something that we don't have resonance with. And, there are so many millions, billions of people on this planet. There's going to be different strains of thoughts and beliefs and expressions. And so part of being a writer that does write nonfiction that is very clear, I'm not like, oh, the red silky hummingbird of life where it's like abstract. I say it how it is, and you know what I'm talking about. And in that commitment, it's a lot of loss. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of, being loneliness. And I think whenever we are able to live with boldness in the world, no matter what we do, as one of my therapists said to me, she was like, Janne, you're a supernova. Like, you're here to blaze and create a different way of being in the world. And like, you don't think Oprah gets lonely? Like, it's not, it's like, I don't know, does Oprah get lonely? Of just knowing that, and I don't want to go like, I'm so over new agey stuff, but I am a manifestor in human design, which we're like the 11% of the population that's meant to lead and push the edges of what it is to be a human and do it in a way that no one has done it. And that's a great permission slip for me to continue to be bold. And so, yeah, I think and then it also absolutely kills me. I've had the first time I'm hearing you say that I was in the Today Show and all of those medias. I was actually crucified in most of those, not all of them. Some of those were nice things, but I wrote an article about plastic surgery, and because I'm so sick of the brainwashing that women's worth is what they look like. That's what it was really about, was wanting women to just know that their worth is not what they look like. And, there's so much consumerism in the beauty industry. It's crazy. And so many things. But I wrote this, I could have had more clarity and probably more grace, this bold post where I was like, God, be a silver fox, don't Botox, like embrace who you are. And I got slaughtered
by people who, what were they? What was the criticism there? They love Botox and what?
Just like, you're not empowering women. I actually lost a poet acquaintance who I really respected completely has stopped talking to me since that day. And it hurt a lot. She was like, you're not really empowering women. Let them be themselves. And to be an artist is to be misunderstood. It's to have a conversation with ourselves that then people experience and interpret in all kinds of ways. And to be, when we're in relationship romantically, we're often projecting what we want and also what we're most afraid of on that person for a long time, like a year usually, until we can get beyond. And to be an artist is to be both of those for other people as well. It's to be in the public is to be misunderstood. And so the first time I made international news, it was for disempowering women was the narrative.
Wow. That must have hurt. I mean, I guess when I hear you talking about this, what I'm thinking is about that saying that you keep your own side of the street clean, or you mind your own side of the street. And it just makes me think of like, well, you are the you're concerned with the domain of your own perspective and reality. And at this, what that also means is letting your listener, audience, critic, fan, whatever, be responsible for their perception and their reality. And just like, no, that's you, that's yours, and this is me, and this is mine. Is that right?
Yes. And that sometimes has looked like me crying in a massage airport chair for 6 hours or not 6 hours, but, bawling in public places because I do feel misunderstood. So it's both. There's a resiliency and an understanding of my commitment and what will happen and the choices I've made. And there's also a deeply sensitive part of me that wants to be understood and wants to be seen in the things that I care about. And empowering women is, I think empowering all humans, my deep why is belonging. So
right.
How I do that is transparency and honesty and all these, my what's are my services, but my why is belonging. So ultimately the slabs of the heart are to encourage other people's belonging. And so, yeah, there's hurt. There's so much hurt. Like, I don't think anyone goes under gunfire without feeling, I mean, at least I don't, I still have a heart. So I feel it and cry and want to be seen in what I'm saying. And you have to let go. I have a theory that as artists, our job is 50%. Our job is to write as if we are on the moon and no one will read it, and bear the absolute guts of our soul in what is true for us and what moves us. And the second that we hit publish or send, we're fucking done, because the other 50% of art is how people receive it. And to marinate in the adoration or the hate on the other side of that 50% is why many people suffer.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, how do I do my 50% in a way that is deeply, deeply true to me? And let the world have their way with it. And some poems I've written have millions of views and some of them have 200. And I love those poems just the same. And it's just that, if we can have that understanding, there's so much more grace for the creative process, which, I tell you, but then if I write a poem that doesn't do well, I still have my own process around that. So
sure, but then that just becomes grist for the mill, right? Then you just now I have more material to work with on my feeling of rejection. So we've been talking about criticism and negative reaction, but have you also, at this point, I'm sure, had that experience of somebody who knows you through your work feeling overly connected to you in a way that they're invading your privacy, invading your personal space, whatever, stalker, spammer, someone trying to, get in front of you, or not understanding that you're an autonomous, separate being with boundaries? And how have you dealt with that?
Well, in the beginning, I let them mail me like homemade perfume and necklaces that they made in love letters, and then
to your home address. So it's like, this is where I live, right?
In the beginning, right when you're first starting, you're like, oh my God, you're like, I would say that was the first 6 months I allowed that, and now I'm more strict. I really think that you have to have boundaries, and it's weird meeting people who have such an insight and feel such a safety inside, and like they know you, and people will just start to cry. And for me, it's the first second I've ever experienced them, and wanting to be authentic in that interaction, and also being like, this is the first second we are actually meeting and you're coming into my world. And so I think I'm gracious, and I also I think most people get it. Some people don't, but I'm good at interrupting. I'm good at interrupting and segueing, and and it's often not me that is someone feels so emotionally attached to. It's that they see a part of themselves inside of me, and it's like I think that some of it, when we become people's idols or heroes, is like they encompass those same parts, and they have maybe yet to fully embody them or step into them or And, so it's like we're a big mirror for other people. So I'm gracious. I hug people, and have boundaries, and no one knows.
And interrupt them and say no when their attention isn't welcome. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I'm asking is because I have a teeny tiny audience compared with yours, but even at my teeny tiny little micro level, I recently got an email, not through my newsletter carrier, but through my actual personal email, from a guy, saying, will you be my pen pal? And you're amazing. And I responded after the second or third email saying, I cannot be your pen pal. Thanks for respecting my boundary. And then the emails started taking a really menacing turn. I'm going to end it all. I thought you were a kind person. All you people only care about your fancy life and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, I know that that's a human being out there, and I know that his story is not about me, and his reality is not actually, his perception of me is not about me. And yet it was hard to shake and hard to, has that happened to you? How do you protect yourself from that kind of thing? Both, or someone showing up at your door.
I mean, like the craziest, someone tried to sue me for like, again, I don't even want to talk about it because I think she still like watches everything that I do, but I've dealt with all kinds of stuff. And it's like, I also feel like it's like, yes, I've dealt with that. And that flip switch of, it's an illusionment, right? Like people put you on a pedestal, and then the second that you show up in wholeness and boundary, that goes away, and they project everything negative onto you. The worst thing that ever happened to me was I lost a dear friend to suicide, and I was writing about my grief, and I met somebody at his funeral who kind of, I became kind of a scapegoat in some ways, but I set some boundaries, and he really lost it and contacted my publisher, everyone I was writing for, friends and family, and told them that I was capitalizing off of my grief and that I had never cared for the person that had passed away. And like extended family members. And I was asked to remove my writing. So that was a whole other level of like someone else's stuff that you get pulled into. That was my weirdest weird.
That's weird.
It was weird. It was a lot. Yeah.
So, okay, we've been talking, we've been talking a lot about the shadow side of going public, and I haven't even got into like the main thing that that I, initially started this conversation off with, which was the shadow side of monetizing your art, monetizing your creativity. I mean, Janne, what you've just described, huge audience, big platform, many people receiving your work and responding to it, your own gratification in creating this work and sharing it, and the business that you built around it, right? What you've just described is many people's, kind of far off greatest dream. But it hasn't always felt like, okay, this is just getting better and better and better and better at the end, right? There have been peaks and valleys for you. And you recently posted on social media that you're actually I think you're shutting down your business or stepping away from certain things so that you can go back to it. It sounds like a type of artistic purity. I'm putting those words in your mouth I don't think you said exactly that, but tell me what happened and why, and where are you going from here?
Yeah, I would say for some of that, I'm still in the cocoon of figuring it out. So I kind of feel that I'm in this transition phase where, I don't know if you've ever been driving and it's so foggy, you can't even see the road in front of you. So you pull over.
So scary. Yeah.
And you don't keep driving when you can't see in front of your face. And so part of me is still pulled over and in conversation with myself around
Got it.
what some of the next parts are. I like to get very dramatic, like all human beings, and say like, it's this, and then I'll change my mind. So with that being said, do I contradict myself, as Walt Whitman says? Very well, I contradict myself, so I may change my mind. And you might be like, what? And truth changes. So everyone get less rigid, because we evolve, and we say I've tried to quit coaching many times and then miss it. So it's just a constant conversation with what we need. And my therapist said something, one of my therapists I work with said something so beautiful and poignant. I was actually in couples therapy, and he said, Janne, you have been in the business of finding someone to run your business for 5 years. And so when you ask me, what am I breaking up with? I'm breaking up with finding someone to run my business, human resources. And I'm breaking up with any business that needs people to run it basically, essentially. So I'm currently in a burnout directly related to a lot of turnover in human resource. So
yeah, wow, yeah.
It's not really what I've done. If you look at my program, Your Truth is Your Medicine, I've had over 850 students in it. I've worked with hundreds of coaching clients. I love that hour that I'm with people, but when you have a program with 500 people or 800 people in it, there is so much shit that isn't what I love involved in that. And no one really, there's like one person has effectively kept the business away from me. No matter, 1 year we made $500,000 in 3 days. And that year I spent $400,000 in expenses because I was in complete survival and burnout. And I wanted everyone externally, to my knowledge, had an incredible experience, but internally it was hell. And, I sacrificed a lot of my artistic gifts. Talking about our gifts in the world, I feel like I've wasted a lot of my artist parts in problem solving gaps in Zapiers, not zapping things. And the other day I just was like, God, I do not wake up to complete Asana tasks. I do not wake up to manage a team. That is not how I desire to be in service. And I know it's a great privilege to have had a business that blew up in a way that had enough people that they wanted to come on an experience with me. And I would also just say that there's responsibility on the other side of that. And I'm always an artist first, always. And I worked closely with Gay Hendricks for 2 years in a one-on-one capacity, and we talk about our genius zone, our excellence zone, and our incompetence zone. I don't know, running a business is in my, I don't want to learn how to do it. And I got very creative. I did values work. I hired people that worked with Danielle Laporte and all kinds of people in the industry. I really tried to do so much of the internal psychological work around creating space of I'm ready to be supported. I'm removing any blocks. The reality is I hate managing people. So when you have a business, you have to manage a lot of the time.
And it becomes there's a machine around it, right? Creating, managing, disseminating that material, putting it out there into the world. And in your case, you were doing launches, and it wasn't just as simple as here's my poem, what do you think? There was all this other stuff around it. So
3 months to build out some of the launches I did. 3 months. Yeah, we would have 4,000.
And you have to kind of ask yourself, wait, do I love this? If I don't love it, why am I doing this? And what is this in service of? So good for you. I'm so impressed, because that must be, well, I think I'm not going to tell you if it was a hard decision for you. I think a lot of people would find that a really hard decision to even just to question the path, when there has been such explosive success, and to think wait a second, do I love this still? Do I love it this way? That's, again, getting back to that radical authenticity, right? Just I gotta speak my truth. My truth is, ouch, I'm tired. I hate it.
And what's really important, and I also want to name too, is that I feel like the the big truth around what I'm really sitting with, and my therapist also, very brilliant, Larry Laveman, everybody, Larry Laveman, works in Solana Beach, California. He said to me, when you go into cycles of burnout, you're reaching down below your cells into your restore cells. And when you reach down there for energy, your 50 trillion cells are not talking to each other in the way that you need to be discerning. So good luck on like who the fuck to hire, what to launch, how much to charge. Do I like my boyfriend? Anything that requires
what should I
discernment.
eat? Yeah.
Like I get stressed about what to fucking eat, or if I should surf or take my dog for a walk first. Like so much ambivalence because of burnout, because of exhaustion. And so where I'm at is like, even if the right person shows up right now, I'm not going to fucking know. So it's not that I'm not going to do this business model. It's just, hey, I'm burnt out. I'm lacking the power of discernment because of where I'm at. And I'm not going to stay in this cycle of everything I've been in for the last 2 years. So it's not that I don't have the gifts. It's not that I don't create impact. It's not that people's lives aren't changing. I wish I was worse at being a facilitator and a coach, then it would be easier. I could be like, I'm not really that good at it. I'm really good at it.
And you love it, right? You love that, the doing it, not necessarily the business administrative side of it, but the doing of it. Yeah, you love it.
Yeah. So it's just not now. It's like nervous system is speaking, and it's not now. And I'm like shut down. People, like someone listens to this podcast might reach out and say, I want to run your business. Like, don't care. Because I'm not in a space of openness to continuing to onboard somebody into my company, because it is so values oriented and so mission oriented. It's like, I feel like I've had constant relationships with every single person. I pour so much into people. And I care so much. It's not, so it's like, I'm just done right now with that part. And, I'm simplifying software. I'm keeping one assistant who, works pretty autonomously. And, it's like, if I can't do a launch with her of something, I'm not doing it. So, just simplifying things down, and wanting to shift more into speaking as a storyteller and publishing more books. So just going to go into a slightly different direction of being in service.
I love it. Well, and again, that's just, it is a bold and surprising thing to do, just because I think that a lot of people, at every level on social media, there's such a kind of an imperative to maintain a shiny facade, right? Like the veneer of success, the veneer of happiness. And I know that that's just, you're not about veneers and facades. So, but the sort of like the financial one or the exhaustion one, the energetic one, like these are sometimes, they're kind of like the ickiest and most tender things, even more so than sex and health and relationships, is this business and success side, which can be so hard for people to stand confidently in and speak the truth about. So I assume that with all of this, sort of the pause, the hiatus, the filling of the well, with it, does that come some more time, more time for creation, more time for writing? What are your days like now, in terms of the making of your art and the writing of your material?
Yeah. So I do believe that I'm going to need some restoration to have anything good, any kind of good creativity. I've worked with lots of different writing coaches and people. And when our body is in a burnout or a survival state, I think it's Maggie or Mary Oliver, who says there's like this silky, whispery part of ourselves. And when we are in survival, so when we are preoccupied around a big transition or in certain spaces, sometimes that part of us doesn't feel safe to come out and to be expressed. So
yeah, that makes sense.
It's not a time to work on my memoir, Chosen. It is a time where I feel okay organizing books of poetry but yeah, I'm in the cocoon. So there's not a ton of energy for writing in this moment. I've actually decided that surfing twice a day, listening to Drake, drinking watermelon sparkly drinks, and drinking as much coffee as I fucking want is how I'm moving through this, because bubbly drinks are great, and the ocean is a space of restoration for me. The water is 70 some degrees in San Diego area right now, and I'm just in that restoration stage, and I'm wildly prolific and not worried about writing. I also I want to write some different poems and some different things, and I need a moment of time to get there.
Totally. That makes so much sense. You can't create from a place of depletion. So priority number one is, get the ship tight and
Drake and watermelon sparkly drinks.
Creative materials.
That is wildly empowering sometimes. And I'm also just kind of over the whole trauma, spirituality, personal development. I'm like, yeah, Drake sounds good right now.
Tell me about that, because I was curious to know about your take on trauma and writing, and just shut that shit down if you don't even want to discuss it. But it is something that, people, I think that just in recent years, maybe in the most recent 5 years or 10 years, there's been a lot more trauma awareness and this understanding that the pathologies that we carry or enact in the world are actually the result of experiences that we had and not some kind of innate brokenness. And that one of the ways that we can meet and process and ultimately release that trauma is through writing, whether that's writing that we choose to do just for ourselves in our own eyes, or writing that we choose to, put on Elephant Journal in front of 11 million people or on our Instagram. So what can you tell me about your relationship with writing as a mode of healing or self-actualization?
Oh yeah. And I also just want to frame that I think we all need specific, all of us have trauma, and trauma therapy is beautiful. I just happen to have been doing an exorbitant amount of trauma therapy for a long time. And there's something called integration. Integration is so good. Sitting under trees is important as well. So I also just want to say I had the deep pleasure of working with Peter Levine in Sedona. I've done EMDR. I think there's a real need to be trauma informed. I've taken a trauma informed, I don't have a psychology degree. I had to take a trauma informed program where Peter was one of the teachers. I think we need to, trauma informed is important, and trauma work. We all have trauma. You just start to unpack it and you're like, that's a trauma? Everything's fucking trauma. So go trauma therapy, but just, I don't recommend doing 3 hours of EMDR a week for months. That was not good for me. I got destabilized. So my Drake and sparkly drinks is just to mega balance the part of me that's been a little too serious for a while. Mm-hmm. And in regards to healing, I don't have the exact science name behind this, but somebody said to me recently that when a psychologist names something for us, or for instance, when Larry said to me, you've been in the business of finding someone to run your business for 5 years. I feel so good every time I say it. When we have something named for us, there's a release in our brain. There's an actual healing in that acknowledgement, which is why, although talk therapy, they've done scans of the brain, and talk therapy does not change a lot of our patterns. So if you're talking to a talk therapist and you're getting dysregulated and feeling I feel like there's a deeper work, EMDR, somatic experiencing, and hypnotherapy are the only 3 therapies when they've done scans of the brain that have actually changed unconscious patterns. Do want to throw that in there. But with that being said, the reason I love writing poetry is I get to name it for people. And so I also get to name it for myself.
Yeah.
There's a very cathartic release and a liberation, I'm sure you saw in my post, but I'm in this transition right now, with 50K of debt. I went through something I can't legally talk about publicly amidst this transition, which was really brutal, and like a thwack in the face by the universe. That cost me like 20 grand. And then there's, I had 30 grand overhead for like years with the company. And again, didn't go to business school. So I'm transitioning right now in this moment, not in an incredibly abundant, supported space, which makes it scarier.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I chose to actually I shared that publicly, and there was a liberation in it because there's been a shame around it. There's been this, debt's gross. I think I think my shame around debt is that I can't take care of myself.
Yeah.
And it brings up, so unsexy, like, hey, I've got 50 grand of debt. And yet Susie Petit's friend and mentor of mine, who I admire deeply, the founder of Poopery, she went bankrupt twice. And I keep remembering that. We actually talked on the phone for 3 hours the other day because I was like, tell me about the gifts of bankruptcy, Susie. And we had a great laugh together. And she's like, I just saw your email. And I was like, yeah. But to circle it back, I chose to share it for two reasons. Gay Hendricks was like, I think you should start to share with people fully what's going on in your life and take an art sabbatical and bring people with you. So I'm in the middle of creating and crafting that. It's a program called Art for Art, because I just feel like art has become content and marketing emails. It's like, fuck, I just want to make art for fucking art for a little while. Maybe it's not the best title, but it works for me. And so I shared about that. And there was a part of me that opened in like, God, I don't have to hide that anymore, in a liberation. And that's when we name something for ourselves. Or if as an artist or a poet, when I name something for someone, there is a psychology, there's like literally a thing that happens in someone's brain where there's a healing.
That makes sense. I mean, narrative, is how we understand the world around us. Little babies have none. They have no names for anything and no way to describe what they're perceiving. And as we move through every new experience and even every old experience, we are constantly telling ourselves a story about what is happening inside and around us. And so I think that when we get really, really disoriented is when we can't piece together any kind of story. And so that's what's so powerful about having someone come and name our situation for us, or finding those words ourselves. And I think that writing can be a way to sort of put the ducks in a row. These are all the various sort of ping pong balls. In my writing, I call it catching the mice, because it sometimes feels like my thoughts and memories and sensations and perceptions and hopes and worries and everything is just like a bunch of mice scrambling around in my brain. And writing somehow just like catches them all, like, okay, this is this and then that, and here's how it all goes together.
Yeah. It's a regulation of ourselves as well. Like,
yeah.
Yes. I like that.
And I think that's especially empowering if we have, if part of our trauma, and maybe this is just true for everyone, but involves being invalidated or having our reality denied or described for us in ways that don't feel accurate and true. Writing and sharing your actual truth, it can be just bring such deep relief. And it's not about setting the record straight or persuading anybody else out there that like to buy into your version of events. It's just about standing in your authentic truth in an out loud way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes to all of that. Yeah. I agree.
So you're not working on your memoir right now, because you're surfing and listening to Drake and drinking copious amounts of coffee. But But I know you've done a little bit of work on it. And just because this is, part of the discussions on this podcast are about process, I'm really curious to know, as someone who doesn't write poetry at all, and poetry to me is just like a scary Pandora's black box. I don't understand it whatsoever. And I just think like if I was, primarily a poet and then set about tackling a very different form, what can you tell me about the difference in process around writing narrative nonfiction as opposed to poetry?
Yeah, well, I feel like with 8,000 Instagram posts, it's so gross. I'm like, Jesus, that's a lot. And writing.
Add up the hours, Yana, add up the hours.
I was like, okay, if we repurpose my content, I wouldn't need to go on Instagram for 22 years. That's great. Did that math. Literally thought about that. Social media is weird right now. And so my process. So I have written a lot of nonfiction narrative for 8 years and articles. And I have a dear friend and mentor, John Cohen, who I love wildly. And he said to me, everyone thinks about a book like a mountain, but it's just a bunch of short stories. And so I think that I've written short stories for my whole life. They're Instagram captions or articles or 500,000 page or 1,000 word essays. So I think what's, it's been a really interesting journey. I know that you know this, and many people who've taken to write a memoir or something that covers a part of their life. And for me, the journey of finding and meeting my father isn't my whole life. It's just a chunk of my story. But it brings up so much, just like a therapy session can dysregulate you. Mm-hmm. Writing about our lives, even though I've done a ton of work on my relationship with my father, with him, with therapists, like 10 years of work. And yet it brings stuff up and then you have to be with it. And so it was very dysregulating to write the story. And it's a movie, it's a total movie. My parents living naked in a cave in India, meeting an Osho ashram, my mom living in this tiny cabin in the Yukon with these big bush dogs, sitting by a fire, like telling people not to come visit her unless she asked them to. The way that I found him, reading my mom's journal, following clues, like him living in a village of 60 people and being the man that he is. He gets his water from the mountains. He grows his food. He has no electricity. I don't know if I told you this, Maggie, but the only way I talked to my father for the first several years after I found him and flew back, he's never had a laptop, had a little tiny phone. The only way we talked was there's 2 tavernas in my father's village, and one of the men, Lambros, who owns one of them, when my father would come in to drink a coffee in Lambros's taverna, thank God for Lambros, he would go to Facebook, and if I was online while my father was there, Lambros would call me and hand his phone to my father. That's how we talked.
He was like a human carrier pigeon.
It's just crazy, but just there's such a the reason I need to write that book is I think that we need to believe in ourselves, but we also need to believe in magic. I think those are dependent on each other in many ways. And it's a movie. I could not write the book. I want to just write the movie script because it's so visual for me as a story. But I'm going to write the book first. And it's one of those projects for me. It feels like the big thing. And as an artist, I think we don't do the big thing because we like to be in fantasy and romance about that big thing and what would happen if we did that big thing. Because we're fucking terrified that if we actually do it, what if it isn't the big thing? So there's a part of me that's in this very fantasy about that book because it feels like my Eat, Pray, Love. It feels like the big story that will skyrocket me into success. And I'm terrified of not doing it creative justice. I'm terrified of trying and there being crickets on the other side of the 50%. And it's also this, I noticed in writing it, even though it was meant to be about my journey, I got very caught up in the beauty of my parents' love story. You probably even noticed that when I was sharing it, where my writing coach, I was working with Jillian Farabee, was like, Yana, we want to know about you and your experience. So I have about 75 poems that are very long form, detailed poems that are conversations with my father. And I love those. And I might end up publishing those first. So much on forgiveness.
Wait, you mean you're sneaking a poetry book into your memoir, or you're sneaking your poetry writing practice into your memoir writing practice?
I don't know. My writing coach was like, I think you should just pitch these poems to a publisher and just say, I don't have the book yet, but here's the story.
Yeah.
Which I might do. And it's much easier to write poetry for me. And
that's nuts. I don't understand that. What? But what you said about the sort of like the weight of high expectations and the when you are working with a piece of work that is just super important, it can become freighted with those expectations, right? So you touched the raw nerve right there. Like, I think that I hear you saying that you're sitting with that and noticing it and experiencing it. And at some point when all the waves have been surfed and the Drake has been listened to and the coffee has been drunk, you'll go back to that and pick it up. But, I think that is where all of us get stuck, even if it's square one, first poem I ever wrote, first article, first IG post I ever tried to write. We hinder ourselves when we get weighed down by those really lofty hopes and dreams and expectations, and how like, oh, what if this doesn't happen? And of course, like the result of letting that rule your mind and your body of activity is that it doesn't happen at all. And you don't have a chance to sort of get it out and then make it better and give it any kind of life, which is just such a loss. So don't let that happen. Okay. Cause it sounds like an amazing story and I want to know all the details.
It is. And I'm part of my chrysalis is a reclamation of my attention,
Ooh, I love that. Like, wait, finger snaps. What?
both Mary Oliver and David White talk a lot about our attention. And I think that's the greatest currency that we're in right now, is our time and our attention. And
so you're so right. And it's even, I mean, we talk about attention in terms of the attention economy, and we think about it in terms of like, how, we will earn other people's attention, but what about our own? This is like the most important attention to own, is how you spend and allocate and invest that precious resource. So, wow. Yeah. Yay for you. That's so important.
Yes. And part of that is saying no to 90% of the stuff that comes at me, because you can live your whole life for other people. I spent a whole week, like in the last, I don't even know what it was just like doing things for other people's ideas or things, or writing praises for other people's books. And you're like, Jesus, where am I? Like, I think that's part of, and one of the upper limits people believe, Gay Hendricks, is that success will be a burden and that we'll, have to sacrifice some piece. And I do think that when there are more eyes on you and more hands, you have to learn how to still live for yourself and to have those boundaries of like, no, I'm not interested in that. And even the boundary, like I think James Altucher says he has like 300,000 unread emails. Like, you don't even have to open the phone emails.
Oh God.
You don't. You don't have to open them. Permission slip. I've had email autoresponders at certain points in my career where I say like, hey, I check my emails Tuesdays and Thursdays. So like, talk to you then. Like, so yeah, it's just, deep reclamation of time. And, that's part of time and attention.
Well, on that note, can I just say how grateful I am that you spent an hour with me here? Like, that's it's such an amazing, juicy conversation. And Yana, you're such an authentic, natural conversationalist. I can't help but go deep and be present with you in this conversation. So I appreciate that so much. before we wrap, I'd love to know if you have, what advice would you give to someone who is contemplating walking a similar path? And you can, define that however you want, whether that's on the influencer side, the business side, the coaching side, or the artist side. What is the thing that you think people need to understand about what this takes and what it demands?
I mean, there's a lot of things. I
suppose also like what it gives, so is what it takes and what it gives. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really important. I was talking about having our 50%, to never stop listening to the voice of yourself amidst whatever happens in your life. And it can become increasingly difficult to hear or trust that voice when you get into a room with other people who are strategists or experts or have all kinds of ideas. And it's this constant, I think about, inherently we are all whole. We have a wholeness to us, and we have, I'm going to use some trauma language, survival mechanisms. There's all these pieces. And, I know how it feels. I think about being in my wholeness, and then I know what it feels like to lean out of my wholeness. I know what it feels like to kind of be pulled into someone's idea or, just getting pulled out of your voice and who you are and what you care about. And I think that we need to use ourselves as our first sounding board and counsel. And so whatever practices or things are needed, not everyone wants the empire. And I think it's just really listening to that voice. I've sat in virtual and physical rooms with people and just completely adopted their ideas and as if they were my own. And I shared in one of my posts, I had a strategist pitch me an idea, and my initial honest reaction was throwing my laptop across the room. That was my body going.
That's an expensive reaction, Yana.
I knew she was on a bed, but
okay.
But it was full throttle, fuck that. And then I did it.
No. So, no.
Please don't do it. Just goddamn, it's to stop lusting over the ideas or trying to find this expert, and to just listen to yourself. And it sounds kind of abstract, but I think just the reason I have been a success as an artist is because I knew who the fuck I was, and I shared it with the world. And to make art for ourselves, and whatever we create, to do it for what is inside. I don't mean that in a, it sounds like we don't care about other people of the world, but that's not what it is. It's just what are your gifts? Know your gifts and offer them, and be careful with leaning outside of your wholeness.
Beautiful. Janne Robinson, that's a remarkable conversation, and I'm so grateful to you for your time and your generosity. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for having me.
I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @SelfishGiftPodcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.